All right. Hello, everyone. And welcome to the March Alive Academy. So today our agenda is we're going to do some housekeeping announcements. I'll introduce Jared. We'll have the question, and then his presentation, and we do have time for question and discussions afterwards. So for housekeeping items, you are all on mute. We do want to encourage you to use the chat box or Q&A section for comments or questions. We will have some polls as well during this session that'll pop up, so we highly encourage you to participate that way as well. This session is being recorded, and we will place the slide deck, recording, and handouts on the live members side of the file archive section in just a few days. We do have a couple of quick announcements. We do have two Alive Academies upcoming. The April 8th session is 2 p.m. Eastern Time. That will be a follow-up to the hybrid conference that was hosted in October. So Dana Litwin will be doing that one, talking about AI and how to have ethical, accurate, human-centered results. In May, our discussion is going to be around exploring the career pathways of volunteer administrators. And so we hope you will consider joining us for both of those. April is coming up upon us, and we as Alive are a Points of Light Global Volunteer Month official program partner. There is a social surge happening on April 1st to kick off Global Volunteer Month. We will be participating in that and hope you will all consider participating in that as well. So more information can be found on the website. With that said, I want to get right to our presentation today. So we're going to welcome Jared Peer, who's a CVA. He is the lead retired and senior volunteer coordinator at Knoxville Community Action Committee. So Jared, I'm going to let you take it from here.
All right, thank you very much. I'm excited to present today. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we'll be talking about identity today, but real quick, a little bit about me. I coordinate the Retired and Senior Volunteer Program, or RSVP, in East Tennessee. And I've been in this role for a few years, but I've volunteered or led volunteers for most of my life. One thing I'm a big fan of in any role is authenticity, being yourself, transparency, and even embracing your awkward. And so I bring that to my work, and it seems to pay off really well. So I want to encourage you guys today with some things that I've discovered along my journey. I think that instead of adapting to some cookie cutter model, it makes a big difference if you are yourself, and that allows you to enjoy your work as well as your volunteers will enjoy it as well. There was a precise moment when I realized that to my volunteers, who I am is more important than what I do. In my last volunteer management role, a volunteer named Judy dropped by my office and she said, "I hate the zoo, but I will volunteer for it if you ask me to." And what she was saying was, "I don't find volunteering for this event rewarding, and I'm not even willing to do it just to help the organization, but I do it for you because you've earned that." Naturally, I told her, enjoy the night off. She made my day and I made hers. But it was really important moment for me to realize that being the right kind of leader was the kind that would earn the sense of loyalty from the volunteers. Being authentic was something that really drew people in, and it let them know that I'm someone who shares their values and cares about them. Over the years, I've learned that who you are matters more than what you do. Our identity is far more important than the what, the different strategies we use to recruit, retrain, or mobilize volunteers. And who you are informs what you do and how you do it. So it's the building block, the foundation. Identity, and we're going to start by defining it. According to Merriam-Webster, identity is who someone is, the qualities, beliefs, etc., that make a particular person different from others. In other words, it's the aspects of your life that make you unique. And as we will discuss, this is critical to our work. One of the reasons is because what we do is no secret. How we do it can be learned, You know, there's no shortage of webinars, books, resources about the volunteer coordinator's essential toolbox. And tools are helpful, yet they're just one part of what we do as coordinators. It's the element that anyone can learn as well. So instead of the what or the how, I'd like to discuss who we should be. That seems to be what matters the most. Someone who brings the wrong attitudes, traits, or tendencies to can actually drive away from an organization. And there's so many things you can do to keep a volunteer program going if no one wants to follow a leader. That's sobering to say, but that does mean we need to pay attention to who we are. Spending some time on developing your own leadership qualities, wisely experience for volunteers at your organization. A focus on so expanding your capacity as a leader will in turn expand the capacity of your program. I like to think of it this way. Recruiting volunteers by what you do adds to your impact, but inspiring volunteers by who you are multiplies your impact. It's the way to go to the next level. Now, obviously, you could have Googled the top good leader and skip this session. So instead of talking about things like good communicator and loyal and hardworking, there are some underappreciated attributes of successful leaders that tend to have an outsized impact on our volunteers. So today I want to discuss these three areas where research shows we can focus our energies to see some pretty big results. Now we've got a poll. What we want to do with the poll, you can also drop answers in chat, but do you feel like you are always putting people first? And do you feel like your organization always puts people first? So you and your organization. Gretchen, if you can swap that out, that looks like poll 3. And we should have poll 1. Of course, everyone's welcome to answer this one as well. What personality best describes you? In our session, how many of us are introverts? How many of us are extroverts?
Do you see poll 1 now, Jared?
Yes, poll 1.
Okay. I thought I had pushed the launch button for poll number.
You know how this technology goes.
You
Gives
know,
us a
you
run for
practice and then there you go. Okay, so I'm going to end that one. Okay, now I'm going to launch poll 1. Let's try this again. Okay, here we go.
All right, perfect. So question Now, Gretchen, after a moment, you can end that poll. Hopefully it'll pop up the results for us. But I'm hoping all of our answers are yes for the first one. There we go. Yes, 90%. All right. Do you feel your organization is this is more of a spread, which is what I expected? 60% say yes, 40% say no. And I think that's really valuable feedback. We're often more confident about our job, but sometimes we have reservations about our organization and whether it's going to put people first. What we want to talk about first is our first attribute. A stellar volunteer leader needs to be humane. Merriam-Webster does define humane as marked by compassion, sympathy, or consideration for humans. If you don't care about people, you might be in the wrong field because that's what we do. And no volunteer wants to follow a leader who doesn't care about them. And it's one of those intangible things. There's nowhere to put humane on a resume, but it's absolutely essential to volunteer services. Everyone assumes that everyone else will be humane, assume noble intent, right? And most of us assume every organization will be humane, but that's why we never discuss it. And that's also why we feel shocked when something inhumane is uncovered. Organizations that deploy volunteers care about causes, but it can often feel like they don't care about the volunteer. Maybe they have slowly shifted to put money first, or their reputation, or adherence to policy, or hitting grant numbers. Sometimes 100% of the focus is on client care, which means 0% of the focus on employee or volunteer care. And so sometimes volunteers are not properly supported. And just look at our language when we borrow it from HR. Volunteers are human resources that we use to make an impact. Not exactly the look we want. Remember, businesses, nonprofits, and governments are all institutions, and their actions, policies, and decisions can feel cold, calloused, and even inhumane at times. The volunteer coordinator is the bridge that shows real concern for your volunteers on behalf of the organization. Coordinators are the human face of impersonal institutions. You're the one person on the payroll who's specifically paid to serve and protect volunteers. And this is very much needed. We'd like to think all organizations and all of our coworkers are humane, especially in caring for our volunteers, right? But the reality is we spend an awful lot of time talking about getting staff buy-in. We literally have to teach our coworkers how to value volunteers because not everyone does. We have to teach our HR departments that you can't just write them up or treat them like an employee because we have to convince them to do what the organization needs. We're not paying them to do what the organization needs. Organizations need superhumane people in their volunteer services departments, both to care for the volunteers and to advocate for them, protecting them from the natural drift of institutionalization. Now, volunteers won't say if they don't feel valued. And I want you to note that I avoided saying appreciated. There's only so much free stuff you can throw at volunteers. Appreciation only goes so far. And it even becomes counterproductive if it's perceived as lip service or a tactic. Weak attempts at showing appreciation fail if they feel taken advantage of or looked down on. Volunteers will call our bluff every time if they feel like appreciation is just a strategy. So organizations need a coordinator who shows authentic, genuine, caring commitment to volunteers as valued individuals. Now, I want to encourage you in two areas. First, humane probably already describes you. You were drawn to volunteer services because you are humane already. Embrace it and live it, even when being humane feels like swimming upstream or seems like it's against your corporate culture. You're the right kind of person to be in this field, and you're exactly what organizations need to balance out the distant and rather inhumane aspects of institutions. Second, humaneness works. A humane, compassionate coordinator is just what volunteers want and need. A humane coordinator attracts new volunteers, which is recruitment. It keeps existing volunteers engaged, which is retention, and it inspires volunteers to do more, which is mobilization. Now, culture and economics have not always embraced the humane. Profit over people is pretty much America's official business slogan. But this practice is shifting. Our best secret that being humane is the path to success is being recognized as the best practice more and more for businesses as well. There's a book called Marketing Rebellion by Mark Schaefer, and he investigates the state of advertising today, and he discovers that traditional marketing is becoming irrelevant. Think of it. When's the last advertisement you remember? When an ad comes up, we look for the skip button like our life depends on it. Right? We pay for streaming TV instead of watching cable. We stream music instead of listening to the radio. Our brains are wired to ignore the irrelevant. So you're probably turning out all the ads you can think about. The same with when's the last billboard you took note of? We just tune these things out. We tune out all marketing in our advertisement saturated environment, unless Schaefer reveals that one thing breaks through the noise, the humane. He says that stories of human impact and compassion will break through. The ads you remember are the ones that connect you emotionally and mentally to the impact you'll have, the people you'll touch, and the stories you'll create. Every Super Bowl ad you will ever remember moved you to feel something. It made you laugh, it made you relate, or it made you feel. Businesses are learning that they have to connect their products or services with genuine stories of human interaction and humanitarian aid. If you buy our shoe, a second pair gets donated. If you subscribe, Alzheimer's research gets funded. If you round up, more kids get fed. Nonprofits were made for this era. We recruit volunteers to support good causes already, and we impact lives daily. This new age of marketing is built for volunteer organizations. The one style of marketing that breaks through people's anti-advertising advertisement walls is the exact kind we're designed for. To win as a volunteer coordinator, we can start at home. Promote the humane aspects of your organization. What are you doing in the community? People will volunteer when they can start at home, or when they can hear the impact that they have partnered with you. And then live it out. Prioritize treating every volunteer as a valuable and respected partner, because they need to see it from leadership as well, not just in the mission statement. Now, I'm a data nerd. I love to reinforce things with numbers. A 2020 study shows that 83% of volunteers are motivated by making a positive impact. 65% want to support a particular cause. 80% want to understand the impact of their service. These are the altruistic, the humane side of volunteerism, and this is exactly what recruits, retains, and mobilizes people to serve. Less than a third of people said to set a good example, to build skill sets, or to spend quality time with their own friends and family. And these are sometimes the self-focused motivations. They aren't as strong of motivators. It's the humane, societal, and impactful elements that make a difference. And they need to see those reflected in leadership. Now, keeping volunteers, retaining them is the same. Only 27% say that gratitude or recognition by staff in the organization is something that keeps them engaged. And 80% of organizations say that that's how they try to keep volunteers engaged. 24% of volunteers say no recognition is needed at all, and 57% say an email, letter, or verbal gratitude is enough. I think it's interesting that only 3% of volunteers desire an event to recognize them, while 19% of organizations use events. This isn't a bad thing. Having an event isn't wrong. I have volunteer recognition events, but recognize that the event itself is going to fail to motivate 97% of your volunteers. You're going to have to couple some of the other things with it, showing them their impact, giving them some genuine appreciation. So being genuine is really important. Tell volunteer stories about their impact, connect them with the people they've helped. It's a really important way to reinforce to them that they're making a difference as a part of your team. Adam Grant says, givers care deeply about doing jobs that benefit other people. And that introduces us, or highlights, our second major attribute. Volunteer coordinators need to be a giver. Now, I want to explain this. Reciprocity style is your knee-jerk response when you're interacting with others, right? Do you tend to be a giver or a matcher or a taker? When somebody asks for a favor, what do you do? If you always agree, you're probably a giver. If you expect a favor in return, you're probably a matcher. And if you calculate if it's going to pay off before agreeing, you're probably a taker. Now, I want to tell you, these aren't necessarily wrong ways to approach things, but they're important to understand in the context of leading volunteers. Here's another way to look at it. When someone asks for a favor, what do you say? Givers tend to say yes without qualifications. Matchers tend to say yes if you do this for me. They want something in return. They'll tuck it away for a future favor. And it's important to know as well, whenever you do a favor for them, they're going to remember that, and they're going to look for ways to repay it. If you feel obligated to repay others, you might be a matcher. And takers will tend to say no unless. They default to no unless they're getting something out of it. If you consider what you'll get in return, and if you feel competitive about getting the better end of every bargain, you might be a taker. Now, like I said, none of these are wrong. You may use different settings, or different styles in different settings. You may always say yes to family. You may always say no to strangers, and you might expect something in return from coworkers. But most of us do have a default response. None of these are wrong ways. You want your lawyer to be a taker, and you want your doctor to be a giver, and you hope your car salesman is at least a matcher who will meet you midway after a good haggle. Gretchen, we've got a second poll. I want people to suggest, what do you think your reciprocity style is? Are you always a giver, a matcher, or a taker? And this isn't about giving money. This is about how do you respond when people are looking for a favor. And then the second question, I want you to guess which style our culture tends to idolize. What is the style that we give deference to after choosing what your own style is? We'll give everyone a moment, and then we'll close it to see the results. I always have some guesses, but I want to let you, without my influence, give us a good answer. Now, my initial guess is that most volunteer coordinators find themselves in this role because they're a natural giver already, that they tend to love just helping other people, doing favors, supporting others. All right, 68% are givers. 32% are matchers. Nobody fessed up to being a taker. All right. Which style do you think culture tends to idolize? This is great. It's right down the middle. 32% giver, 32% matcher, and 36% taker. All right, I need this feedback afterwards. That's fascinating. All right, my initial guess was that more people would be givers and more would lean into matchers to be volunteer coordinators. Not as many takers find themselves in this role. But it's often true that society leans toward the takers, especially in American or capitalistic societies. Adam Grant wrote the book Give and Take. It's a fascinating read for anybody who finds themselves giving and wants to understand why not everyone's that way, or finds themselves giving but wonders why they feel like they need to give to excess. He says the fear of being judged as weak or naive prevents many people from operating like givers at work. People who prefer to give or match often feel pressure to lean in the taker direction. Now drop an answer in chat as well. I want you to make a guess. Which style tends to land at the bottom of the success ladder in organizations? Takers, matchers, or givers? I'm seeing a couple givers. Is it unanimous? All right, we got a couple guesses and there are lots of givers. I'll tell you, statistically, the truth is that givers fall to the bottom. As it turns out, they often give to excess, right? They might not get their work done because they're too busy helping others out, or they may make more mistakes, losing focus because they're multitasking to help others. They might not get credit because they're too quick to give credit away to others. Givers can give to excess. They can compromise their own productivity and reputation, leading them to sink to the bottom. Now, in chat again, if the bottom of the ladder is dominated by givers, which style rises to the top of the ladder across a wide range of disciplines? You got some takers, got some matchers, might be leaning in the matchers direction. Now, a lot of people are saying takers, which reinforces that our knee-jerk tendency is to defer to them. But you'd be wrong. If you said matchers, you'd be wrong too. It's the givers again. While the bottom of the ladder tends to have more givers than takers or matchers, so does the top. The top performers in organizations across a wide range of disciplines are givers, while matchers and takers tend to dominate the middle. It turns out that some givers tend to get helped because they gave help. They tend to be liked more by others. They get cheered on by their peers. They get promoted by their bosses. People respect them, support them, and advocate for them. And no one is trying to knock them down a peg like we do with takers. Right? Takers may rise quickly, but they fall just as quickly, burning too many bridges and souring too many relationships to maintain that peak success over the long haul. So givers may rise slower, but they stay entrenched when they reach the top. Now, here's an encouragement for you. First, never feel guilted into being a taker just to succeed. You know, as we just found out, givers can rise to the top as well. We need to turn around our idea that takers always win, or that good guys finish last, or that givers can't gain. Givers are the true powerhouses of society. Trust that impulse to be a giver because it'll pay off over time. Second, volunteer services tends to draw givers as coordinators. If you're a giver, you should unleash that part of your identity to thrive. And if you're a matcher or a taker, explore how developing some more giver tendencies at work can help give you a leg up in your position. Giving draws people in. Everyone wants to volunteer for a giver. Being a giver helps with recruitment. Volunteers also tend to be disproportionately givers as well. They're giving their time after all. They want to follow someone who is like them. So people like to be around givers. Being a giver helps with retention. And givers inspire and fuel other givers and matchers, multiplying their influence and productivity. Right? Being a giver helps with increased mobilization. Now remember, givers can sink to the bottom as well. So some of this is from Adam Grant's book, Give and Take. Some of this is my own life experience. I've got a couple suggestions on how givers can avoid falling down instead of rising to the top. Or as Grant says, become champs instead of chumps. The first is one we always talk about. Set professional boundaries and stick to them. Set times that you won't take calls or look at emails. Don't feel like you have to be on call. Don't give out your personal number. Leave work at work. Leave work on time. Prioritize your work tasks and then help others only when yours are managed. You got to think about giving in a sense that makes sense. We often think of selfless as a virtue, but people who don't take care of their own needs eventually fail at taking care of others. As Bill Gates says, there are two great forces of human nature: self-interest and caring for others. It's interesting, those seem to be opposed, but people who can balance them, those are the people who are going to rise to the top. Now here's a chart that kind of lays it out. I love this. People can be concerned for others and people can be concerned for self. If they have low concern for others and low for self, they tend to be apathetic. If people have a high concern for self and a high concern for others, those are your successful givers, all right? They care about others, but they care about getting their own things done first. Then you have people who have a low concern for themselves and a high concern for others. They're selfless and that's virtuous, but they're gonna burn out. And people who have a low concern for others, but a high concern to self, they tend to be selfish. This is where your takers fall on the spectrum, and they tend to burn a lot of bridges instead of burning out. So making sure that you are showing as much concern for yourself as concern for others can be really important in giving you longevity in your work and avoiding burnout. A second thing is to ask for help and reciprocation. Givers can learn something from matchers in always making sure that you're getting something out of it as well. Being willing to ask for help doesn't make you look weak. It establishes that you know where your boundaries are, or you know what your limits are, and you know that building a team is more important than doing everything yourself. Asking for help and reciprocation is really important. I think that people feel afraid that when they ask for help, they'll look inferior. But I feel, and I both oversee volunteers, I oversee staff, I think that it looks like wisdom. You know, asking for help expands your network. You benefit from the advice of others and you accomplish more with their assistance. Just like this counselor advising Santa, always being the giver can be toxic to your own balance in life. So making sure you ask for help and reciprocation and never look at that as a bad thing. Now, third, the antidote to burnout is impact. Knowing your impact, seeing your impact, showing the impact to the volunteers. This is the kind of thing that helps keep people from burning out. I think that burnout tends to be a loss of hope. And so whenever they know they're making a difference, it's harder for them to burn out. Grant says givers are your most valuable people, but if they aren't careful, they burn out. So you have to protect the givers in your midst. Givers are often sacrificing themselves, but they make their organizations better. He also notes a remarkable principle of giver burnout is it has less to do with the amount of giving and more with the amount of feedback about the impact of that giving. So just thinking back to having volunteer events, make a part of your volunteer event impressing their impact on them. Find ways to connect yourself and your volunteers with the results of the work you do. This can insulate your team from burnout. We don't burn out because we are tired. We burn out because we're weird, because we're unmotivated, and that often results from not seeing the results. Also, identify the givers, matchers, and takers in your network. All right, givers are people you can help and rely on for help in return. Givers constantly find creative win-win solutions where everyone walks away better than they started. Matchers are great people to have around as well because they will seek to reciprocate every time they receive, and they'll catch the giving bug and want to give more. Givers and matchers are your gems. Takers, however, can drag a team down. It's good to be aware of them, and maybe you consider more thoughtfully where you place them on your team. If a taker is the leader of a team of volunteers, it's not going to be a good match for everyone else on that team. It turns out that when you have a taker on the team, givers become matchers. They start putting up walls and start contributing less to protect themselves from being taken advantage of. So if you identify takers in your network, you know who to be careful around, but also you know the kinds of assignments you might want to give them. Maybe they're going to be better at fundraising rather than customer service. Like they're a go-getter. They're going to get as much of a piece of the pie as they can for your program. I had a volunteer who was teaching computer classes, a very teaching-centric, patience and one-on-one support kind of role. And it turns out that they are very much a taker. After we kind of figured they were rubbing people in the class wrong, they were rubbing the instructors wrong, we sat down, we really had a good heart-to-heart talk about it, and we found a different role that would be fitting for them. What they do now is they help with a tax prep program. So they're not serving a program that's dishing out money to the community. They're serving a program that's making sure the government gets its due. They're also in a role where they're making sure check boxes are correctly done, the right forms were used. It's a very fastidious role, and it's something that a taker is going to be more competitive about getting it done right, perhaps. It was one that she admitted afterwards that was far more gratifying to her as well. So it's not a bad thing to have takers on your team, but it really lets you know who you need to make a little bit more care around. Now, don't judge a book by its cover. Remember, reciprocity is just one aspect. And I think that when it comes to identifying givers and takers, agreeableness is an attribute that throws us off. Giving and taking isn't always clear. Givers aren't always nice people, and takers aren't always mean people. We often confuse agreeableness with reciprocity styles, the way they try and get things done. So remember not to judge a book by its cover. We have another chart here, and I love this one as well. All right, you have people who are agreeable and they're givers. All right, these are pleasant people and they're helpful people. All right, and then it's easy to identify the disagreeable takers. Right, they tend to be unpleasant and they tend to be unhelpful. You don't run into them all the time because they're not the kind of people who are going to volunteer their time anyway, but they're easy to identify. Then you have some people who are pretty disagreeable, but they're still givers, and they can be a really valuable asset to your team. All right, these unpleasant but helpful folks may be surly, but they are reliable and they'll always say yes, even if they grumble along the way. Everyone needs a disagreeable giver on your advisory board. Right? You can trust them to give you that honest but unpleasant feedback that nobody else is going to volunteer. But beware of the agreeable takers, people who are just naturally pleasant, but their default is to take. They're unhelpful. These smarmy folks are going to draw you in, but guess who's going to stab you in the back? An agreeable taker. All right, they're genuinely nice people, but their default reciprocity style is to take care of themselves first and to take as much of the pie as they can for themselves. So when it comes to reciprocity, giving is a tendency that wins the day. You need to double down on giving. Society may feel like it defers to takers, but givers dominate the top if they're strategic about their giving and aware of other people's styles. Now, our third and final attribute is personality awareness. All right, I'm from the United States, and our country tilts not only toward we're takers, but also extroverts. All right, leading volunteers is a role that introverts can thrive in, and they don't have to become more extroverted to do it. If you're an extrovert, you can learn a lot from the introverts on your team. And if you're an introvert, you can embrace that identity and live it out. Right? You don't have to fake it to make it with a bullhorn. All right, and your volunteers are gonna thank you for it because just as many of them are gonna be introverts as well. Gretchen, we've got one final poll. I just wanna check out the breakdown of our group. Who's an introvert, who's an extrovert? It'll take us 1 second to pop this up. Oh, nice. All right, so 65% introverts and 35% extroverts. I would not be surprised to find that a large number of volunteer leaders are introverts. It tends to be something that we gravitate toward. All right, more introverts. Now, here's our third book reference. Quiet by Susan Cain is a fantastic book. If you can see that tagline, The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking. All right, I feel this every day. This book is really amazing. And Susan Cain's a fantastic author. This is a New York Times bestseller, and it's aimed at helping extroverts learn to appreciate what introverts bring to their team. And it aims to inspire introverts to embrace their natural leanings because of their unique value. These phrases you see on the screen: radical humility, quiet fortitude, shy and courageous, quiet strength. These all seem like oxymorons, but they all appeared in obituaries for a forceful introvert who inspired a 381-day boycott, Rosa Parks. Right? Many cultures tend to favor the bold, the loud, the boisterous, but bold doesn't have to be loud or boisterous. There is power in quiet resolve that often gets undervalued in our noisy world. Even in America, one of the loudest, most extroverted countries in the world, studies suggest as many as half of our population are introverts. There are millions of us quietly strong like Rosa Parks. We live in an extroverted culture, so it pays to understand it. Susan Cain says the archetypal extrovert prefers action to contemplation, risk-taking to heed-taking, certainty to doubt. You can quickly see why a society of nothing but extroverts would quickly grind itself to the ground, right? A world that acts instead of thinking is headed for trouble, right? Introverts are who balance us out. Introverts tend to be thinkers who uncover some of the most brilliant discoveries. Introverts brought us the theories of gravity and relativity. Introverts brought us Google, E.T., and Harry Potter. Put more eloquently by Winifred Gallagher, neither E equals MC squared nor Paradise Lost was dashed off by a party animal. If introversion is part of your identity, don't hide it. Feel encouraged that you're in a career role suited for you. If you're an extrovert, listen to your introverted volunteers. They can supplement the strengths of an extroverted team, but you must ensure that their input is heard. Here are some things that introverts bring to your team. Right? They come prepared. They've thought out what they want to say. They avoid risk-taking and rash decisions. They tend to ask questions and clarify instructions, and they value getting it right the first time. They notice details that other people miss. They're empathetic and caring. They're cooperative team players. They're often sensitive to injustice. They have a better focus often with less mistakes. And it's always important to remember that meek isn't weak. It's strength under control. It's really important. All the things they bring to a team could be overlooked. So tips for extroverts. Extroverts lean on the introverts for insight and perspective, right? Identify the introverts on your team and give them voices. Find roles where their thoughtfulness, resourcefulness, and methodical ways will result in successes for your team. Add one to your advisory and make sure you create space for them to contribute to discussions. Be intentional about creating a volunteer environment where both personalities can thrive. Extroverts will make themselves noticeable. All right, they don't need encouragement to be themselves, it comes naturally. But introverts on your team, they need you to notice them. All right, they don't feel like they can speak up or contribute unless they've been given permission or given empowerment, where you've created that open kind of opportunity. So as an extroverted volunteer manager, don't feel like you need to do everything or jump in and control everything. Take a cue from introverts, step back, spend more time planning, and involve others. Things will go smoother. You'll get buy-in from your introverts and you won't feel like everything is on your shoulders. Now, tips for introverts: embrace and lean into your given personality, right? It has its own power. Volunteer services is an introvert's heaven, right? Dealing with small groups or individuals one-on-one, communicating through calls and emails and in person in quiet settings. It's a field that specifically accommodates the high quality and intimate interpersonal interactions that we love already. Volunteer services may not always be flashy, but it's always meaningful. It's always personal, and it's a career where it pays to be an insightful thinker rather than an impulsive doer. The goal isn't to do everything yourself, which may be an extrovert's go-to response. The goal is to motivate and inspire others to act, which doesn't require speeches and bullhorns. So don't fake extroversion to succeed. People want the authentic you. Know with confidence that you balance the extroverts out. Don't hide your introverted qualities. If they see you embrace your personality, it'll give your volunteers confidence to live out their own. One of the best compliments I ever received, it was from an elementary school guidance counselor, and she said, "You are so confidently weird around others that it allows them to be their own brand of awkward around you." And I was like, that's really cool if you create space for people to be themselves by just being honest about your own qualities. Introverts, they need their voices to be heard. Your voice as an introvert needs to be heard. And introverts on your team need you to notice them and prompt them to speak up and contribute the unique things that they have to give. The fact is that both groups contribute different skill sets. Research from an evolutionary view suggests that both traits survived because they both bring something valuable, in fact, essential to the table. A leader whose team benefits from both skill sets is the one that will thrive. If you want your team to excel, value the personality you bring to the table and be aware of the personality that your volunteers bring to the table. Now, as the saying goes, be the change you want to see in the world. This is usually a paraphrase of something Gandhi said. If we could change ourselves, the tendencies in the world would also change. As a man changes his own nature, so does the attitude of the world change. Identity traits influence our every action, even when we're not aware of them. It's more dangerous when we're not aware of them. So when we want to see change in the world, we have to start by changing our own attitudes and tendencies. And that might mean prioritizing people over tasks, becoming more humane. That might mean being more strategic and helping others, becoming a successful giver. That might mean being more aware of the personalities around us, empowering introverts to balance the extroverts. I suspect you're all well on your way. So if you take nothing else from this, take some empowerment from it, that you're the right kind of person in the right kind of role. And your knee-jerk reaction is probably the best way to deal with it, even if it goes against the kind of culture in your organization. The same attitudes, traits, and tendencies that drew you to volunteer services in the first place are the ones that will help you succeed. Embrace them even when it feels like they aren't recognized or appreciated. This is a secret to longevity in volunteer services. Success and fulfillment will come from leading your volunteers in the same way you want to be led, with authenticity, from identity, being humane, being giving, and being real to your personality. And it's going to make you enjoy your job so much more when you can comfortably do it in your own skin, being yourself. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I know we do have some time for questions, and then we've got some, maybe a couple closing announcements. Feel free to drop if you have a question in the chat. But what I love is for people to just walk away feeling a little more empowered about how they're going about things. A lot of times in my career, I have felt guilted into leaning into a tendency that's just not natural to me. And then I find out that it's not natural to my volunteers either. So absolutely, you have permission to be yourself. And your volunteers are going to appreciate that, absolutely. I guess at one point I had to ask myself, would I be proud of following me? And so I just thought about it. I'm like, maybe, but only if I'm being real, only if I'm being authentic. Yeah, what kind of tools are helpful for you as an introvert when you need to recharge? One thing we will find, introversion is great for this job, but this is a very social job. I mean, you're going to be talking to people all day. You're going out tabling, you're recruiting, you're following up on emails, phone calls, you're visiting places where your volunteers are working, you're doing trainings. So tools that are helpful as an introvert to recharge. I think some of it goes back to being a successful giver. Know your boundaries. I have a boundaries problem. I like to say yes to everything. So I've learned more and more and more. I have to carve out time where I'm not going to be looking at email. If you have the opportunity, you can ask for things like 1 day a month to work from home, where you can really get dedicated focus time, but that also lets you recharge, removing yourself. I had a cubicle that was right on the hallway, and everybody would stop to talk to me on their way to talking to everybody else down that hallway. And so I talked with my boss about it, and we moved my cubicle 2 cubicles down the hall, and it changed everything. So sometimes it's about rethinking your physical space. One thing I find with volunteer coordinators, we feel we got to be there for everything. So when's the last time you took vacation? You know, if you are getting vacation time, you know, you really need to use that time to recharge. That's one thing I always have to remind myself. You have the time off, take it. Nothing's going to burn down while you're not there. So I always have to remind myself, I feel like sometimes we're a one-man show or a one-woman show. But the fact is that we can let other people hold it for a day or for a week for us to get out and recharge. But what is one thing an extrovert can do to get along better with introverts? This is a part I stripped out of my presentation. I think we often ask people, how are you doing? And they say, good. And then we move on. I think being authentic and trying to fish out a little bit more information from them can be a really good way to build rapport with an introvert who just wants to move on from the conversation, but will feel seen and appreciated if you can dig a little more out. So a lot of times I'll say something like, how's it going? Good. What did you think about? Or how are you enjoying your volunteer role? Or have you seen the latest newsletter? Or, you know, adding a second question on shakes it out of the polite routine, and it really lets people be authentic with each other. It gives them permission to contribute more to the conversation, and at the same time, it helps you to learn more about them. I think that extroverts show you who they are. You have to be intentional about getting to know who an introvert is. You have to ask them, what do you like reading in your free time? What's your favorite animal? It can even be simple questions, goofy questions, trivial questions. But that signals to them that even as an extrovert, I am a warm and welcoming person for you to approach. You are welcome to come and chat. Are there things we can do as icebreakers that are more introvert friendly? The answer is no. I hope you're chuckling, all right? Sometimes there is value in fishing introverts out to be a little bit more extroverted, but I do think that is the most awkward part of going to any in-person conference I've ever been to, when you're forced to get up in the room and do something just outside of your normal experience. I just take it as a teachable moment, but we find the same thing in the faith community. If you've never thought of it this way, ministers are volunteer coordinators. Every church in the history of the world is like 1 to 3 ministers leading 100 to 300 volunteers, which they just call congregants instead. But that's how they run their nonprofit. All the people attending volunteer their time. And they always have what we call the fake and shake. All right, greet someone in the pew next to you at every church service. And so I think that this is something that institutionally across all types of volunteer sectors, we fall into this. I think that one way to do it is to make an icebreaker that's more writing focused. Like everybody, there's slips of paper at your table, jot down these 3 things and then share them with someone near you. Then you've given them an introverted task paired with an extroverted expression. So think of it that way. What would an introvert like to do? Give them something to read, or give them something to write, or ask them a question that they think about before they then join a group to discuss it. I went to a conference recently where they had a breakout group like that. It was really fun, where they were like, all right, so right where you are, just think about this prompt. And we'd all think about it for 60 seconds and then be like, all right, share it with someone beside you. So you got to focus. You're like, okay, I got to do my introverted part of it. But icebreakers are a tricky one because by nature, they are very extroverted. Yeah, love sitting with introverts because sometimes it's okay to just be quiet, but it's also they're gonna be methodical about keeping the conversation going. An extrovert may have a million things they want to share, but they also don't feel like they have permission to share that unless somebody actually authentically asks them, hey, what's going on? You don't seem like you have the energy you normally do. Everything okay in life? You can invite that information from them. Sometimes an extrovert is also paired with talkativeness. And so I know my volunteers who are too talkative. So that helps me make educated decisions about how I use them as well. Maybe they shouldn't be as public facing if they can't rein in the conversation to get the job done, but also they should never be doing data entry in the cubicle across from me. Because I know that as an extrovert who's also talkative, that they're just going to distract me for the next 3 hours. They need to be in a cubicle in another part of the office. So just knowing these things about yourself and your volunteers can make a really big difference in how you deploy your volunteers effectively on your team. It can also help you be the smoothing oil between conflicts between volunteers and staff. Sometimes it's an introverted staff and they're driving me crazy. That should be a red flag for, I bet they're an extrovert. I wonder if there's maybe a better way that we can do this, or a better task we could give them, or remove them physically from each other in the office so the extrovert can do their job without driving the introvert crazy. And it works vice versa. You might have an extroverted person who is like, my volunteer gets the job done, but they never talk. And you're like, well, maybe ask them a couple of insightful questions. And just ask them how the day's going. Ask them, how long have you been living in Knoxville? How long have you been in this town? That can just open the door to getting a peek into their life story. What are skills that you have that you don't get to use? That's a great question, especially to pull out a little information that's useful to you rather than trivial. So I think part of it, watch some videos on YouTube just about starting up conversations or keeping conversations going, because me as an introvert, it was never really natural to me. It's definitely a skill I had to learn myself. And I noticed the comment, sometimes you have volunteers that they just gotta chat before they get started. And if they have that boundary, they need to chat. They've been starved for social interaction. They need to chat. But after they chat a couple minutes, they'll go and get started on that. I think that's an important or helpful thing as well, knowing whether they know what the boundaries are or recognize that you do need to get back to your work. But I always think that providing social interaction to our volunteers is added bonus for them. That's going to aid in retention because they know that somebody cares about them, somebody knows them personally. Yes, absolutely. We'll be sending out a copy. I've sent over a slide deck, and the video is always recorded of these presentations, which is a great learning resource as well. Go back through the last few if you weren't able to attend them.
Jared, there was a question from Shelley. Did you see that?
I didn't. Go ahead, if you have it handy.
Yeah, one of the volunteer coordinators on my team is an introvert, but wouldn't want to be identified as such. How can I help her to understand her importance?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Not everybody loves labels. We're using them to communicate, among professionals, but just throwing that out like, man, you're a taker. That may not be well received socially by people. So identifying people is a useful tool, but not necessarily a conversational thing. Whenever you do have an introvert on your team, I think that subtle compliments are really valuable to anybody. Like, I appreciate when you provide feedback, or I really liked whenever you improved on this project that I gave you, or I really just think of like subtle ways to compliment them, because introverts also don't want to be on stage. All right, they don't want to be glamorized or put in front of everybody else. One thing that I do for introverted staff, I will write a email commending their work, and then I'll just copy them on it. Then there's no interpersonal awkwardness of them wondering if I'm flattering them or anything like that, but they get to see the complimentary thing that I sent to our mutual boss about their performance. So letting them just eavesdrop on that. And my organization doesn't do performance reviews, but that's a good time to give positive feedback as well. Introverts are usually really good at taking, positive feedback and incorporating it, even if they're not vocal about. Yeah, when you said you appreciated feedback, I started thinking I could probably give more feedback. So sometimes you can just coach them through what you tell them you appreciate. You can also ask people, what do you appreciate hearing about? Do you appreciate constructive criticism? Do you appreciate, asking them how they prefer to receive feedback from you? Some people learn by reading, some people learn by hearing. So there's so many different elements, learning styles and such, that maybe they prefer an email, maybe they prefer, for you to chat with them next time they're on shift in person. So yeah, now one of the troubles you can get into is I've got 380 volunteers. There's no way I can memorize every single one's tendencies. But I do make notes on their account of things that I find out. They're a great public speaker and they love chatting with others, or they're great at interpersonal conversations. They may be not great for a presentation, but they may be wonderful to sit at a table and chat with people coming by. So yeah, just making notes about things can help if you have a lot of people. My dentist does this. Every time I walk in, I'm like, you read my file because you asked me about the latest books I read. They know the things about me. So I love whenever professionals in other fields do that, take notes about their people. And I think that shows an introvert that you really do care about them. You took the time to notice their birthday, took the time to notice their tendencies, or to note something in their life. Well, thank you everyone for coming today. Amy, do we have a couple follow-up announcements?
Yeah, just have a couple follow-up announcements. Just wanted to thank you so much, Jared, for this presentation. I have an entire page that I've been writing on during it. So
I love it.
It really was a great session. There's been lots of positive feedback in the comments as well. So just wanted to say thank you. There is a link here to the Academy evaluation. We always appreciate that feedback and suggestions for future presentations. Also just wanted to share that if you are not a member of Alive, we would love if you were to join us. I think Jared and I would both share that we've gotten a lot of benefit out of being Alive members. And so there's different types. We also have a pay what you can membership because we know that some nonprofits are operating on very small budgets. So that is something to consider as well. Follow up, the session will be posted on our website for members. Also have email for Gretchen, who's our association manager. If you are interested in following up or learning more about some of the work we're doing here. But thank you all for joining us. This was an amazing session and hope you have a great rest of your day.